I'm David Anfam. I'm a writer about art, curator, art consultant, and in general, a lover of the arts. In my rather limited experience of 65 years, most things in life tend to happen by chance. And when I look back on my life, it's very different to how I experienced it. Key factor is a hidden disability, although it's not that hidden in this video because I'm sure you can see and the camera can see my hearing aid. I think one of the reasons I went into the arts was because I was deaf. If you're deaf and have a disability, then there's a strong tendency for your vision to get the upper hand. And I love looking at things when I couldn't hear them. And I never thought I'd make a grade to get to the Courtauld Institute of Art. But somehow I did. It was just one of those things. I remember the A-level examinations to this very day. I was petrified with nerves. From the Courtauld, once I did my BA, went straight to a PhD. And to this day, I owe an enormous debt to my teacher and tutor, John Golding. John Golding wasn't just a wonderful art historian. He wrote what is still the canonical book on Cubism and many other books beside. He did a fantastic Matisse Picasso show at Tate, which went to MoMA in New York. But it's to John Golding I feel immensely indebted, because it was John who really set me on the path to the subject. I call it a phenomenon, not a movement. The subject called abstract expressionism. Because it's a big mouthful, I now tend to say just ABEX. The overwhelming bulk of my work at the moment is writing about art. I write because I enjoy writing, and I write because I enjoy reading. Secondly, what I really enjoy is curating. And as you probably know, I curated the Survey of Abstract Expressionism at the Royal Academy of Arts here in London in 2016-17, which, with all due modesty, was the largest survey of its kind ever held in Europe. There were 165 works covering painting, sculpture and photography. And most recently I've curated what has amounted to a mini retrospective of a work of Linda Benglis, the tremendous Greek-American sculptor. Artists have very specific ideas about how they want to have their art shown, and curators have their own ideas. I'm going to be very outspoken here. We're in an age when a lot of people call themselves curators, and a lot of these so-called curators will probably die if they saw a work of art. They die of fright. A proper curator, a really good curator, is someone who calibrates the installation, the placement, the lighting, the whole organisation of art in a particular space. And success or fail, that's what I've always tried to do. Curation is about sightlines. Sightlines are very important. The ability to see one work in a perspective and to triangulate it with another work. And people often forget that. They think curation is just a question of plonking works on the floor or on the wall in a gallery. It's just a white cube idea. It's not. It's about trying to make the works come alive. Well, it goes without saying I'm interested in abstract expressionism, ABEX, but I like to move both back and forward from American art of mid-century. And I'm fascinated increasingly by contemporary art, because I want to see where artists are going, what they're doing, what they're coming out of. And as it happens, today is Monday. As it happens, yesterday I paid a studio visit to a contemporary artist called Erin Lawler, who is doing extremely good work. She lives in Fish Island near Hackney Wick. And I love studio visits. I love actually meeting artists, because there's no substitute for seeing them where they are, in this place, the site, the space where they're working, and it's very different to encountering artists in museums. But, and this is rather interesting, to quote Franz Kafka, I like to take sides against myself. I like to think of art pre-modern. I love to go back to the Baroque. And on Christmas Day 2017, I found myself in Amsterdam, and I was walking through the Rijksmuseum, which to my surprise was open on December the 25th. I went past all the, well, let's call them the big guns, the Franz Hals, the Night Watch, all of that. But then in a side room, I came across this small still life, peaches on a stone shelf, by an artist I knew of but didn't know terribly well. It's a Dutch still life artist of the second half of the 17th century called Adrian Coorte, C-O-O-R-T-E, and I was totally blown away by this small still life. It was very veristic, very naturalistic, but there was a great deal of artifice in it which concealed his artistic skills. And I stood in front of that still life, peaches on a stone shelf, and I thought this still life gives me everything I want to see in abstract art: the geometry, the organisation, the purity, the glowing colour, the light. These peaches were literally ablaze with colour on a very sombre background, and I began to wonder whether or not pre-abstract art, representational art at its very greatest, Titian, Vermeer, artists like that, Rembrandt, I began to wonder whether perhaps they were even greater than the art which I've grown to love, modern art. It's quite interesting because the Abex artist Willem de Kooning, he said that the old masters were greater than any modern artists. So here I am judging contemporary artists, but also in a Janus face kind of way, trying to look back to a distant past, to their Western and Eastern, their global artistic heritage, and to see where emerging contemporary artists fit in the wider map and pattern of things. I look for artists in the art fairs, on the walls of galleries. I like to form very close relationships with dealers, because after all, it's dealers whose mission it is to find out new artists. And I'm not saying that I always disagree with the dealer's eyes or taste, but they are a kind of foundational matrix for which to look for new artists. I look at the magazines, I look online. Paper magazines are almost dead by now. The Burlington magazine is one of the few still standing, but everything else seems to come in art blogs, e-magazines and so on. I keep a very close eye on those, and the more I write, the more I want to connect up artists I know with artists I don't. And sometimes new names pop up and I think to myself, well, she or he, that's rather good. I really want to take a closer look at their work. What do I look for in new artists is a very good question. Above all, I look for seriousness. We often forget that art is not born just out of the world around us, but predominantly art is born out of other art. This is a lesson that the great art historian Ernst Gombrich more or less taught us with his best ever selling art book, The Story of Art. The story of art is a story of art emerging from other art. I don't necessarily look for originality. All artists start off by looking at other work they admire. What I look for, and here is where the artist with whom I'm very much associated, Clifford Still, the American abstract expressionist, I look for people who have the courage to go their way. And it takes courage when you're young, in difficult times, probably the most difficult times now since the period between the two world wars. And what I really look for is artists who've got a heart. I don't care if their work is pure abstraction. I don't care if they're doing something from a model, whether it's representational. I don't care if they're exploring issues of gender, sexuality, personal identity. What I'm looking for is a human artist, someone who is concerned with what is ultimately our greatest interest, and that is a human condition. So far as I'm concerned, the responsibility of any judge, no matter how important or insignificant they may be, the ultimate responsibility is what it is in life itself, truth. There's no point in choosing someone just because they press a particular button with you. There's no point in choosing someone because they're onto a certain trend which happens to be the flavour of the month or the day, the week or whatever. The responsibility is to look very, very hard. And this is what, going back 40 odd years, some of my teachers at the court told me, John Shearman, John Golding, those kind of teachers, you can't look too much. And at the end of the day, art may be about a zillion things out there in the world. It may be about painting Christchurch Spitalfields. It may be about ecology, about toxic waste, or it may be about gender and so forth. But at the end of the day, it has to be about truth. And art, as far as I'm concerned, is ultimately a matter of ethics. And that is what the responsibility of a good judge, who doesn't pander to the flavours or the tastes of the moment. Someone who exercises their vision and their mind and reacts with honest judgment. That's, in my opinion, is what a good judge is about. What do I hope to see from entries is enjoyment. Art always has to be fun. It also has to be serious. And what I hope to see in the best entries is a combination of both fun and seriousness. Otherwise, there's no point in looking at art. I've got one piece of advice. Don't give up. Life is battle. We don't always win it. We all know what's going to happen in the end. But art, if it's any good, outlasts us. And so my advice to every single entrant in the Ashurst Emerging Artist Prize, my advice is keep at it, keep your head down, be stoical, and believe in the end about what you're doing. The greatest challenge for artists is not to get stuck in a rut. And sometimes artists do something that's very successful. They get commercial, critical acclaim, and then they paint or sculpt or photograph, or if you think of installation art, they install themselves basically into a corner. And that's a big challenge. And we've seen lots of artists who have really got stuck in one thing. I can think of a major contemporary artist who's been painting stripes for 40 years. They've been doing it terribly well, brilliant, but you have to break out of a mould and you have to think outside the box. And a lot of artists have been, in a sense, victims to their own fame. And that's something that you've got to try to escape. I'm not saying you've got to be original for originality's sake. I'm just saying that you've got to look at yourself. You've got to keep your art, your trajectory under constant scrutiny to see where you're coming from and where you're going to. And that's absolutely crucial in my opinion. The art world is a business. And to recall the old Money song from Cabaret, it's money that makes the art world go round, and it's money that makes the world go round. But we still like to think there's something beyond money, and that there are things money can't buy. And the art world shouldn't just be a plaything. Of course, people are making millions all the time out of art, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Let's make millions out of art rather than the exploitation of the environment, everything around us. Art's a good thing to make millions out of, and it's been happening since at least the Renaissance, if not a long time before. Going right back to Greek antiquity, art was still about money. It was about preciousness. But I think at the end of the day, the art world has to give us something, some kind of experiences, some sensations, some insights that ordinary reality can't give us. I think my last thoughts are that we're in a period of incredible instability, and every day brings some kind of new news, and more often than not it seems to be dystopian rather than utopian. And my considered thought that I hope human beings, and by that very fact art, I hope it can continue to thrive in what is looking like a very, very dark world.